Welcome back. Today we're jumping into something that's really shaking up the tech sector, specifically AI. We're talking about the U.S. government's recent moves to restrict AI chip exports to China and the pretty immediate financial fallout for big names like Nvidia and AMD.
Yeah, it's a major development. And for this deep dive, we've got some solid sources to unpack it. There's the Investopedia piece, which is useful because it cites the actual SEC filings from Nvidia and AMD. So we hear directly from the companies in a way.
Okay, good. Direct sources are key here.
Right. And then we've got the New York Times giving us that broader geopolitical picture, the context. Plus, Morningstar Research has analysis on the financial side, the actual numbers and projections.
So the plan is basically understand why these controls are happening, what the specific dollar impact looks like for Nvidia and AMD, and kind of situate this whole thing in the bigger U.S.-China tech relationship.
Exactly. And what's striking really is just how fast and how significant the financial reaction has been. Billions of dollars potentially wiped out almost overnight.
Okay, let's start there then. The restrictions themselves. What exactly happened on April 9th?
So on April 9th, 2025, the U.S. government officially told Nvidia that going forward, they'd need an export license to sell their H20 chips to China.
An export license. And this isn't just a temporary pause.
No, the language was pretty clear for the indefinite future. That signals a much more permanent shift in policy for this specific type of technology.
And the reason given. What's the official concern?
The stated goal, coming from NVIDIA's own filing, is to stop the H20 chip being used in or diverted to a supercomputer in China.
Supercomputers. So it boils down to worries about advanced computing power ending up somewhere sensitive.
That seems to be the core rationale, yes. Preventing potential military or strategic applications, it highlights those ongoing national security concerns.
And it wasn't just Nvidia targeted here, right?
Yeah.
AMD got similar news.
Correct. At basically the same time, AMD faced new export restrictions on their MI308 chips. So you've got the two biggest players in this high-end AI hardware space, both facing the same kind of regulatory clampdown.
I saw the New York Times report mentioned it wasn't just those specific chip models either.
That's right. Their reporting suggested the Commerce Department made it clear the rules apply not only to the H20 and the MI308, but also to their equivalents.
Equivalents? That sounds like they're trying to close loopholes.
It certainly seems that way. It suggests the government wants to prevent China from getting similar AI capabilities, regardless of the exact part number or who makes it. A broader scope, definitely.
And the Investopedia article called this the latest salvo in an escalating trade war. That language is pretty strong.
It is strong and, it reflects the reality. These aren't isolated incidents. They're part of a pattern we've seen developing over the last few years, increasing friction, especially in technology, between Washington and Beijing.
Okay, let's pivot to the money then, the financial impact. Nvidia seems to be expecting a really big hit.
A very big hit. They're forecasting a charge of about $5.5 billion. That's billion with a B. And it's expected in their first quarter results for fiscal 2026, likely reported around late May.
$5.5 billion. That's staggering.
Yeah.
What does that charge actually represent? Like, what costs are included in that number?
Good question. According to their filing, it covers inventory, purchase commitments, and related reserves, specifically for the H20 products aimed at China.
So inventory is chips they've already made.
Exactly. Chips sitting on shelves, basically. Purchase commitments are orders they've already placed for parts to make more H20 chips. And the reserves are money set aside anticipating losses because they likely can't sell all this stuff to China now without these new licenses.
It's like a huge investment suddenly frozen in place.
That's a good way to put it. A massive amount of capital and resources tied up with a very uncertain future in what was a key market.
And speaking of key markets, the projections for future revenue from China have completely changed, haven't they?
Dramatically. Morningstar Research reckons China's share of NVIDIA's total revenue, which was up around 20% not long ago, is going to drop to close to zero.
Wow. From 20% to near zero. That's not just trimming. That's basically writing off a major customer base.
It forces a fundamental rethink of their global sales strategy, absolutely. You can't lose a fifth of your market overnight without major adjustments.
Small wonder their stock dropped then. A 6.5% fall on Wednesday, the report said.
Yep, that's the market reacting instantly. Investors see that potential revenue hole and the uncertainty it creates, and the stock price reflects that concern pretty directly.
Okay, now what's the story with AMD? They're caught up in this too, financially speaking.
They are. AMD's looking at potential charges too, but the number they've flown is up to approximately $800 million. Still a lot of money, obviously, but significantly less than Nvidia's figure.
Up to $800 million. But I notice there's a condition attached to that, isn't there? It's not guaranteed they'll take that full charge.
Exactly right. That up to is important. The actual charge depends heavily on whether AMD manages to secure the necessary export licenses for their MI308 chips.
Ah, so if they get the licenses, the hit could be much smaller.
Potentially, yes. If they can get approval to sell some or all of that inventory and fulfill commitments, the financial damage would be reduced. So there's still an element of wait and see for AMD.
And for them, too, that potential $800 million covers the same kinds of things as Nvidia's charge: inventory and commitments.
Yes, the filing mentions the same categories: inventory, purchase commitments, and related reserves tied to the MI308 products potentially blocked from the Chinese market. It shows it's the same kind of operational disruption.
And did their stock react similarly?
It did. AMD shares were also down about 6% on Wednesday, so the market is clearly worried about their China exposure and the financial risks involved, even with that contingency about licenses.
It really seems like this goes beyond just these two companies, then. Other U.S. chip makers might feel the heat, too.
That's the assessment from analysts at Citi, yeah. They expect these tighter controls to have knock-on effects across the U.S. semiconductor landscape.
Were any other companies specifically mentioned? I think Micron came up.
Micron Technology did, yes. Although the Citi analysis pointed out something important, Micron is kind of already mostly cut off from China.
Oh, right, because Beijing put a partial ban on them back in 2023.
Exactly. So while these broad tensions aren't good for Micron, the direct impact of these specific new AI chip rules might be less severe for them compared to Nvidia or AMD, who are actively selling these types of chips there until now.
And Broadcom was mentioned, too, but for a different reason. Something about TikTok.
Yeah, that was interesting. The concern for Broadcom, according to Citi, stems from their business dealings with ByteDance, TikTok's parent company.
So it's not just about selling the chips directly, but maybe about companies enabling Chinese tech giants that rely on this kind of processing power.
That seems to be the implication. It suggests the scope of U.S. concern might be widening, potentially affecting companies further down the supply or value chain if they have significant ties to Chinese tech firms using advanced AI.
It really does underscore that this isn't just a tweak to export rules for a couple of products. It feels like a more fundamental shift.
I think that's the right way to see it. It signals a more restrictive posture from the U.S. on advanced tech transfer to China, and the consequences could be quite far-reaching for the whole industry.
And one detail that really jumped out at me was about the Nvidia H20 chip itself. You mentioned this earlier. It wasn't even their top-of-the-line product.
No, and that's a crucial detail. The sources describe the H20 as less powerful than its newer ones. More than that, it was specifically developed to comply with the previous round of U.S. export controls for China.
So they made a weaker chip specifically for that market, thinking it was okay, and now even that chip needs a special license.
Precisely. That fact really highlights how much the goalposts have moved. Technology that was considered acceptable under the existing rules is now being restricted. It shows a definite tightening, an escalation of control.
Okay, let's try to wrap this up. If we boil it all down, what are the absolute key things to take away from this whole situation?
Well, I think first, it's the sheer scale of the immediate financial impact, especially for Nvidia, looking at potentially billions in charges. That's very real, very fast.
And
Second, the stated reason remains focused on national security specifically, preventing these advanced AI chips from powering Chinese supercomputers. That's the consistent message.
okay, security concerns.
And third, it's clearly bigger than just Nvidia and AMD. This signals a broader tightening of U.S. policy towards tech exports to China, potentially affecting many other companies and reshaping that whole segment of the tech industry's relationship with China.
That sets up our final thought perfectly. We know how interconnected everything is in tech globally: supply chains, research, markets. So thinking longer term, what could the ripple effects be? Not just for these companies, but maybe for how AI itself develops globally. And what does it mean for the whole geopolitical tech race? It really makes you consider that balance, doesn't it, between trying to address national security risks and the economic consequences that come with these kinds of broad restrictions.
A very complex balance indeed. Lots to think about there.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. Thanks for walking us through the details today.